The call came in the middle of the night. 3 a.m. in Mallorca, a time when even someone like Rafael Nadal, long accustomed to the global rhythms of tennis, would expect nothing but silence. He picked up anyway. At first, he assumed it was something routine, news from the Rafa Nadal Academy, an update about one of the young players he mentors, or perhaps a logistical issue that couldn't wait until morning. But what he heard instead instantly cut through the quiet. The voice on the other end wasn't calm. It was urgent. Strained. Line panicked. The Upper Austria Ladies' Linz Open, a tournament with over 35 years of history, was in serious trouble. Not a minor issue. A crisis. Ticket sales, which organizers had confidently projected months in advance, had suddenly collapsed. Entire sections remained unsold. Sponsors, normally steady, predictable partners, were now restless, questioning their commitments, even hinting at withdrawal. And the reason? Shockingly simple. Alex Eala wasn't in the main draw. The 20-year-old Filipina, whose rise had electrified tournaments across continents, had been left out after her rankings slipped from number 29 to number 45 following her loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it changed everything. Because this wasn't just another player missing from the lineup. This was the draw. The same player whose presence had overwhelmed crowds in Melbourne. The same player whose matches had driven massive surges in Dubai. The same player whose jerseys had sold out within hours in Miami. Without her, the energy vanished. Sponsors noticed immediately. These were the same brands that had watched her merchandise outperform expectations, that had seen her face dominate social media, that understood, perhaps better than the rankings ever could, her real value. And now, they were sending a message. Clear. Direct. Uncomfortable. Give her a wild card, or prepare to lose millions. By the time the situation was fully explained, Nadal was no longer lying down. He was sitting upright in bed, fully awake, absorbing the scale of what he was hearing. Because this wasn't just about one tournament struggling. This was something deeper. A collision between tradition and transformation. Between a system built on rankings, and a reality driven by global attention, fan connection, and cultural impact. And when he finally heard what the organizers, and possibly the Women's Tennis Association, were considering next, even Nadal, the king of clay, a man who has seen everything this sport can offer, was stunned. Linz, Austria. The Upper Austria Ladies' Linz Open was supposed to be a celebration. Its 35th edition, a milestone few tournaments reach, promised a week of high-level tennis, bright lights, and packed stands. Champions past and present, like Ekaterina Alexandrova and Jelena Ostapenko, were lined up to headline the event. Prize money had been increased by over $140,000 from the previous year, signaling both growth and ambition. Everything seemed ready for success. Then the numbers came in. And the celebration turned to panic. The pre-sale reports were devastating. Attendance projections, built on decades of steady growth, had collapsed. Ticket sales were down over 40% compared to the previous year. Sessions that had always sold out, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, the final, were now barely half full. A financial loss loomed over the tournament, one that threatened its very future. The cause? Everyone in the room knew. The Eala effect, the force that had crashed ticketing systems in Miami Open and driven a 48% surge in Dubai, was nowhere to be found. Alex Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina who had become the most magnetic player in women's tennis, was absent from the main draw. Her ranking had dropped from number 29 to number 45 after a fourth-round loss to Karolina Muchova at Miami. Without her, the fans who had traveled from continents away, from Melbourne to Miami, simply didn't show up. For the organizers, the irony was sharp. They had spent 35 years cultivating relationships with local sponsors and media. They had invested heavily in marketing campaigns, player development programs, and facility upgrades. They had built tournaments that were dependable, professional, and respected. And yet, none of it mattered when the draw lacked Eala. Because in women's tennis today, numbers on a ranking board could not compete with the pull of a phenomenon. She wasn't just a player. She was a movement. And Linz had just learned what it felt like to run a tournament without one. Nothing else mattered. The fans hadn't come for the tournament. They had come for Alex Eala. And when she wasn't there, they stayed home. The sponsor meeting had been scheduled as a routine check-in, a review of the tournament's finances, a discussion of next year's plans, the standard corporate cadence of a WTA event. But as soon as the ticket sales numbers were revealed, the room's atmosphere shifted. The sponsors had been following the Eala phenomenon for months. They had seen the 48% ticket surge in Dubai. They had watched the Miami Open ticket system buckle under the sheer weight of Filipino fans. They had pored over merchandise reports showing Eala's jerseys outselling every other player in the field combined. And the calculation was simple. Eala equals revenue. The Linz tournament, with its modest ticket sales and aging fanbase, was failing to deliver the return sponsors had come to expect. Voices sharpened. Questions demanded answers. When tournament officials explained that Eala's ranking had dropped, and that she was therefore excluded from the main draw, the reaction was immediate. "Get her in," one sponsor snapped. "We don't care how. Wild card, special exemption, whatever it takes. If she's not playing, we're not paying." The ultimatum sent shockwaves through the tournament organization. For the first time in its 35-year history, Linz wasn't just planning tennis matches, it was scrambling to navigate a crisis of its own making, one that no spreadsheet, marketing plan, or years of experience had prepared them for. Because this wasn't about logistics. It wasn't about prize money. It was about a single player who had become bigger than the sport itself. The WTA rules were unambiguous. Wild cards were granted at the discretion of tournament organizers, but they were traditionally reserved for local hopefuls or rising stars who hadn't qualified by ranking. Under normal circumstances, Alex Eala, ranked number 45, would have been ineligible. But these were far from normal circumstances. The Linz Open faced a looming financial disaster. Sponsors were threatening to pull out. Ticket sales had plummeted. And the only player capable of filling the stands, of reigniting the excitement and energy that the tournament relied upon, was being blocked by a ranking system that ignored her true value. Inside the WTA, discussions were reportedly tense, even heated. Some officials insisted that the rules must be upheld, no exceptions. Others argued that the rules existed to serve the sport, and if they were now preventing the sport from thriving, it was time to reconsider. After all, rankings measured performance, but not in influence, not charisma, not the ability to unite fans. One anonymous source captured the sentiment perfectly. "Alex isn't just a tennis player," the official said. "She's a phenomenon. And if the rules are standing in the way of the sport thriving, then maybe the rules need to catch up." The debate underscored a larger tension in modern tennis, the collision between structure and spectacle, between regulation and cultural impact. For the WTA, this was no longer just a tournament decision, it was a test of relevance in a world where one player could command attention beyond the confines of rankings or traditional metrics. And in the eye of that storm, Alex Eala's name was the one that could save, or reshape, the Linz Open entirely. Alex Eala had already proven something undeniable. She could fill stadiums, sell out merchandise, and bring new fans to tennis. That kind of influence has value, and the WTA needed to find a way to recognize it, whether through wild cards, strategic seeding adjustments, or even a reconsideration of how the ranking system measures a player's true impact. When the decision finally came, it was unprecedented. The WTA officially announced that Alex Eala would receive a wild card into the Linz Open main draw. The statement cited extraordinary circumstances and acknowledged the player's significant contributions to the growth of women's tennis. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Critics accused the WTA of bending its own rules to accommodate a player who hadn't earned her spot by ranking. Yet others recognized it as a necessary evolution, an acknowledgement that the sport, and the way it engages fans, was changing. The Eala effect had been discussed in tennis circles for months, but the Linz crisis thrust it into uncharted territory. The question everyone was asking, why was the presence of a single player so crucial to a tournament's financial survival? The answer was connection. For the Filipino diaspora, Alex Eala is far more than a tennis player. She is a symbol of possibility. A child from Manila who rose to stand on the world's biggest stages, visible, celebrated, unstoppable. She embodies the OWF dream, the idea that sacrifice, relentless effort, and belief can create something extraordinary. When players arrive from countries like the Philippines, where opportunities in tennis are limited, stadiums aren't just filled, they transform. Every cheer is amplified with pride, every banner and jersey carries a story, Every fan is a reminder that representation matters. Alex Eala doesn't just play tennis. She bridges continents, cultures, and communities. In Linz, that bridge was about to reopen, and the stadium was ready to feel what millions already knew. Her presence is more than a game, it's inspiration in motion. A Davis Cup venue. One veteran referee observed earlier in the year. People are cheering for their country, not just for one player. That connection translates into economic activity. In Dubai, ticket sales jumped 48% when I was in the draw. In Miami, her jersey outsold every other player in the field combined. In Linz, without her, the tournament was facing financial disaster. The numbers were undeniable. Eala's presence at a tournament generated millions in ticket revenue, merchandise sales, and media exposure. Her absence cost tournaments millions. The WTA, which had spent years trying to grow the game, had finally found a player who could deliver that growth, and they had no idea how to handle it. For Alex Eala, the wild card into the Linz Open is more than just an entry into a tournament. It is validation. It is proof that her value to the sport cannot be measured by ranking points alone. Her ranking has dropped from number 29 to number 45 after her fourth-round loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. The 390 points she earned from her magical 2025 semi-final run have expired. The clay season stretches before her. Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros. The challenges are real. Slower conditions, higher bounces, longer rallies, the need for patience and tactical awareness that hard courts do not demand. But she has something that no ranking can measure. The love of a nation that will follow her anywhere. In Linz, she will compete as the number 7 seed behind players like Alexandrova, Tolson, Samonova, Ostapenko, Navarro, and Raducanu. She will face opponents who have more experience on clay, who have won titles on the surface, who have nothing to prove. But she will also have something they don't. The support of thousands of Filipino fans who have traveled to Austria to see her play. I could win the whole thing or lose in the first match, Eala said in a podcast interview with former world number 1 Andy Roddick. If I don't get the win here, I'll get it somewhere else. The words are those of a champion in the making. And with the wild card in hand, she has the chance to prove it. The Linz Open was on the brink of financial disaster. Ticket sales had collapsed. Sponsors were threatening to withdraw. And the reason, according to tournament officials, was simple. Alex Eala wasn't playing. The 20-year-old Filipina had dropped from number 29 to number 45 in the world rankings after her crushing loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. Without her in the draw, the fans who had packed stadiums from Melbourne to Miami simply didn't show up. The tournament was facing a loss that could threaten its future. Then the sponsors stepped in. In an unprecedented move, they demanded that the WTA give Eala a wild card into the main draw. The message was clear. Get her in or wheel out. The WTA, facing a crisis of its own making, relented. Rafael Nadal, who has trained Eala at his academy for 7 years, watched the drama unfold for Morca. I have never seen a tournament's financial viability depend on a single player who is not even in the draw. He said this is unprecedented. Now as Eala prepares for the clay season, Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, she carries with her something that no ranking can measure. The knowledge that her value to the sport cannot be captured by numbers alone. The Czech curse remains unbroken. Her record on clay is modest, but she has something more powerful than any statistic. The love of a nation that will not be silenced. Was the WTA right to give Eala a wild card into